I'm back with another book review. At this point, I feel like I'm going to just review books as I go along. I used to not review so many books. I maybe would do a book review here and there. But I'm thinking I'm just going to do lots of book reviews while I have the time, even if they're really short and spoiler free. Because why not? Today I'm going to be talking about The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. I'll admit I didn't think this would be my kind of book. Steph suggested it to me, and it's like very fantasy-esque. So in the beginning I read the synopsis and I thought it sounds okay, but I really wasn't sure if I actually would like it. But I really liked it. I loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Basically, the plot description before I get into my review is basically the main kind of protagonist in the story, the main character, she is trying to collect all these objects. So basically the world is set in New York in modern day, and it's been a long kind of ongoing tirade against people who have magic, with this kind of order restricting them from leaving New York, and kind of, you know, the people with magic were kind of always like they always had a harder life, and they, you know, were always persecuted basically. So the main character, Esther, she tries to collect these different objects, and then this one final object that they need to kind of overthrow them and try and take down the order, and also to try and better their kind of life and to, like, better everyone's life who has magic. So yeah, it's quite interesting. I'll describe it as like a fantasy heist book. It definitely, if you like heist movies or heist books, I think I've read about half of Six of Crows, and I feel like it was kind of like that, where like they're kind of like a group of people who, you know, are together for one common goal, but they all kind of have their own stories, and they're all kind of a little bit suspicious. This book has multiple perspectives, there's lots of different characters, but I found that quite, sometimes I think when there's lots of different perspectives it's quite hard and it's sometimes a bit annoying, but I felt like this was good and necessary for the book. It gave us lots of different perspectives, and, you know, it was kind of nice to see how different characters interlinked in that way. It does do a lot of time jumping, which I quite liked. I quite like a lot of shows, you know, with time travel or with time jumps. So yeah, I really like that aspect. The time era that it said is in like the early 1900s for the majority of the book, and I think I automatically, when I hear that kind of era, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna like the book, because I kind of just judge it based on the fact that, like, it's going to be 100% like in that format, but it really isn't. It's just all about the different characters and, like, obviously aspects of the story, take that into consideration, but it's not like, you know, that doesn't make the whole book its own thing. So yeah, it's set in the modern day in the early 1900s, and it's all about her trying to get these objects to then overthrow the order. But yeah, I found this book quite this book kept me on the edge of my seat the whole time. There's a lot of like kind of like con artists and lots of like different characters that you don't know if you can trust what they're saying, and you know, you're always kind of like suspicious of the different characters in the book, which I thought was quite interesting, because you kind of never knew what was going to happen, and, you know, even when you thought you knew something, it turns out you didn't. So yeah, I really like that aspect, and I quite like the different people who have the different magic. They kind of have, if you will, like their own powers. I kind of thought they were kind of like, you know, like the X-Men and their mutants, they'll have their own kind of thing. It kind of reminded me of that in a way. And yeah, I quite liked trying to figure out what people's powers were, and you know, how that played into the story. So I thought that was really interesting. There were a lot of parallels in the book, without saying what the parallels were and spoiling it. In the beginning with the time jumps, I was quite confused if it was the same people or different people. I feel like I always try now when I watch something, or read something, I always try and like guess what's gonna happen, and I will say I guess like one or two things, but I definitely was totally totally shocked by some of the stuff that happened. It did definitely surprise me, and kept me reading till the very last page. Yeah, I think I was happily surprised, and I don't know, sometimes I think if I have lower expectations or if I'm unsure, I tend to, like, if I enjoy it, like it even more, because I didn't think I would like it. So I'm really excited I got into this. I read this in like 3 days, and normally fantasy, like, I like fantasy, but I normally don't, like it that much. So I'm excited that I kind of was able to really get into this book. 4 out of 5 would recommend. I'm going to read the second book now, The Devil's Thief. The audiobook was really good. At the beginning, the narrator's voice kind of annoyed me, but then by the end I realized she was actually doing all the different voices. I was like, wow, that's really good. So yeah, I think I'm going to try and read more of the actual ebook this time, because I found the audiobook I really liked, like the kind of vibe, and like it kind of sets up the story quite nicely, and you hear the different like inflections and stuff. But it definitely, I think, took me longer to read it that way, so I'll definitely be reading the other book as more of an ebook and see if I get through it quicker. But overall, I really enjoyed this book. It was a nice surprise, and I hope it kind of inspired me to get back into more of the fantasy books. I have a lot of fantasy books that I bought when I first started Bookstagram that I kind of like, oh, I don't know. But I think, yeah, it's going to spark like more of an interest there. So if you've read this book, let me know what you thought. If you end up reading it, message me or comment on this and let me know how you liked it. Steph, who recommended it, also has a video on her booktube. I'll link that down below. Go give her all the love. And yeah, thanks for watching.